PERS similarly are increasing, and PERS is going from 11.77% to 12.6%, which is about a $200,000 cost for Long Beach.
Can I ask you a quick question about?
Of course.
Just there. So in these, for the 125 million base allocation adjustment, how is that, let's assume it passes, will each of the districts have their own ability to make decisions about how to use that, or is that going to be prescriptive, or do we know?
Districts will have the ability on how they're going to use it. What you see here in this paragraph is a direct quote from the governor's budget, and this is what they're really encouraging that districts use those funds for. It is recommended that it would be ongoing funds, which these are ongoing costs, and so it would help defray those increases to the districts.
So the hand in the velvet glove is, if you do these things, it'll probably become an ongoing source of funds, but if districts tried to spend it in other ways, we might not get it.
I would say that's a possibility. The state budget can change every year depending upon the governor and the legislatures that are in session at any given year. Really the concept is this is where the governor wants us to focus the funds. I think we've been requesting more ongoing revenues that aren't tied to COLA and which aren't tied up in categorical funds. And so this was a way that the governor came up with to help us defray those costs. Because so many times when we do get COLA increases, then that's subject to negotiations. And a lot of those funds are tied up with negotiations and spent that way, and there really isn't a lot left to pay all the other increases that we have that are listed here. And so this piece of funding that is proposed is really to pay for those other things.
If I can add, Trustee Otto, I'm sure both the Chancellor's office, assuming that this passes, is it in the final budget, I'm sure we will receive further clarification from Chancellor's office, Department of Finance, again, encouraging districts to pay down the increased costs because there was a lot of advocacy around the changes in PERS and STIRS and the impact it's going to have on districts. So this is a direct response. Given the governor's direct language on how to use these funds, it will be our recommendation when we get to adopting a budget that we allocate these funds for those specific purposes because there's no doubt that the Department of Finance will audit the system once the budget passes, and I wouldn't want to be one of those districts that did not comply.
Got it.
The next item of significance to community colleges is this $49 million increase for our FTES rate. And so what it's doing is it's increasing the rate that we're paid for our career development and college preparation courses. A lot of you may know these as our enhanced non-credit courses. And so what it is doing is allowing districts to be paid for those enhanced non-credit courses at the same rate that we are for a credit course. For Long Beach, we have about 228 FTES that we reported at our period 1 report for these enhanced non-credit courses, which will equate to more funding for us in the next fiscal year. The next line item, $106.9 million for access. This is growth funding. In order to receive this funding, we have to increase the FTES that we are generating. We are currently estimating that we would need to generate an additional 374 FTES in order to capture the majority of this funding, or the maximum amount of funding that we can for our district. That would bring our total FTES to 20,681 if we did achieve that in the 15-16 year, which would be the highest that this district has seen. The next item is
well, the game plan would be, first of all, monitor the budget as we begin to build the schedule for next year, we build a tentative budget, we would try to build a schedule to maximize enrollment and maximize revenue. Now, if spring enrollment is a challenge to reach our goal, then we may, in the Budget Advisory Committee, recommend that we budget below the overall growth target so that we don't put revenues in the budget that may not have a chance to materialize. But that's a discussion that'll be had in the Budget Advisory Committee.
I think the other unknown with the growth funding is, you may recall that in legislation for 14-15, the governor put forth that a new growth formula needed to be created by the Board of Governors. That funding formula has been created, although there's much consternation throughout the entire system that people don't like the growth formula, and they don't feel that the growth formula is going to be achievable. So there's discussion right now whether or not that growth formula will move forward, or if they're going to stay that growth formula for another year and give the system another year to try to tweak it and come up with a different formula. So it's yet to be seen how much would be available to Long Beach. The estimate that you'll see here shortly on the calculations of how much I think we'll get is based upon the growth formula being put into place that has been approved at this point in time. So that could change. We'll know in a couple months whether or not that's going to change.
Trustee Otto, do you have a question?
Yeah, and it seems like this is a great teachable moment for everybody about how we kind of do things. Last year, we made a very tough decision due to the passage of AB 955 to offer credits in classes in intersessions that would be charged, billed out at a differential rate. And we aren't doing that, or haven't done that in the winter intersession. And I'd like to ask the superintendent president to explain why that is and how we're doing this, because it's a window into how community colleges get funded.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Otto. As we discussed during the advocacy for AB 955, and once it was signed into law, the law allows for community colleges, for 6 community colleges, Long Beach City College being one of them, to offer extension courses during the intersession when the college has more demand than it's able to serve with state resources. In other words, there are wait lists, there are students that are being unserved that are not funded by state apportionment, much like the California State University and the University of California have that ability to do. So the law also was written, and we ensured that it was written in such a way that if a college, our college, does not have demand that exceeds our capacity with state funding, then we could not offer extension courses. So this winter, we had more state-funded courses than we had demand for. So there was no need to offer extension courses. If that calculus changes by the time we hit the summer, we would consider offering extension courses if there are significant wait lists that we feel need to be served.
So it's all driven by serving students and what students want, which is of course classes and providing as much opportunity to for education as possible.
Yes, the driving factor is student demand.
Okay, the next item that is proposed by the governor is $351 million for mandate claims, and this is one-time funding. What this one-time funding is meant to address is deferred maintenance, instructional equipment, and other one-time costs. So it's not anticipated and not meant to be spent on anything that has ongoing nature, such as salaries and benefits, but rather to really focus on these items that are one-time in nature. There is a $100 million augmentation both for the Student Success and Support Program, that's SSSP, as well as the Student Equity Program. Both of these programs had a huge influx of funding the current fiscal year. You may recall that in 14-15 we received $100 million for SSSP and $70 million for student equity, and student equity really got kicked off in the current fiscal year, so it's a relatively new categorical program that is underway. The concern with the additional $100 million augmentation in SSSP is that there is a 2-to-1 match that is currently required by districts, and so what that means is for every dollar that we receive from the state, we're required to match that dollar with $2 of unrestricted general funds for the district. And with this magnitude of an augmentation, the numbers are getting quite high and quite challenging in order to be able to try to make that match.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to ask, I apologize, we'll probably all kick in a little bit here, but I'm just always trying to figure out how we can get into these pot of money. The one, for example, on the $351 million for mandate claims, how are the colleges, there's got to be a formula for that. For Long Beach City College, for example, how can we get in line for some of that $351 million?
Well, that one, the way that we're proposing is that would be paid out on a per FTES basis. So we would receive a set dollar amount based upon our 14-15 period 2 FTES that we report. The period 2 FTES goes in April 20th. And the current estimate is that it's about $308 per FTES. So you'll see in a later slide where I've kind of summarized each of these initiatives and the impact to Long Beach. But if it holds as it is, that's over $6 million for us, which is a huge influx of one-time funding and much needed in both deferred maintenance, instructional equipment, and other one-time costs such as technology. I think these are areas that are needed, and we can spend it on one-time funds, but that'll be something we'll discuss at the budget committee.
Irma, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Trustee Archuleta?
I have a question regarding the match. How are we prepared to meet that, and what would be the impact? I know this is an issue that is going to impact districts across the state, but how are we set up to meet that match?
In 15-16, I'm not even sure that we could meet that match. We haven't fully ran all the numbers yet. If we're allocated a similar amount of funding that we received in the current fiscal year, we would get just around $1.5 million in additional funds for SSSP, which would mean we would need to come up with an additional $3 million that we're spending on the SSSP program. And we're currently not spending that much in additional funds. So it is something that we are aggressively advocating with the Chancellor's Office, because this is the Chancellor's Office decision. This isn't the governor or the legislature. This is strictly the Chancellor's Office. And I represent our region with the chief business officials that advises the Chancellor. And we are, as I said, aggressively advocating that match be waived for this additional $100 million, because districts aren't going to be able to match it. The other aspect of it is that we got such an influx of funds in the 14-15 year, and we didn't know how much we were going to get until October, and then it was revised in November. We're having a hard time even spending the amount of funds that we got this year, and they're supposed to be spent by June 30th. So we really are advocating to have an extension to the current funds. It seems like that we are going to get about a 6-month extension, but it just kind of puts off the problem with getting another huge influx. If we have 6 months to finish spending this year's, but then we have to have next year's funds spent by June 30th, it's making it sometimes having too much money is a bad thing. Just in trying to get it spent and geared up for that. So
Exactly. Well, thank you.
The last item on this slide is $500 million for adult education. Now, this is one that I don't have any estimate on how we would be impacted locally, and the reason being is this funding is kind of a result of the local control funding formula that was imposed on the K-12s, and they got rid of the categorical program related to adult education on the K-12 system. So there was a bill that was passed, AB 86, that created these regional consortiums for adult education. For the current fiscal year, these regional consortiums received a grant in order to write a plan on how the region is going to meet the adult education needs. And now, with this augmentation of $500 million that will be going out to the region, what the governor is calling for is a allocation committee to be derived that would then determine how much is going to go to, say, Long Beach City College, as well as Long Beach Unified, and any of the other regions that may have an interest in providing adult education courses. So the last two items.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Someone have questions? I'm sorry.
I actually had wanted to ask a very quick question, unless you tell me you're going to cover it later, that had to do with the $100 million for student equity. The mantra for the last few years has been access, success, and equity. And yet equity wasn't very well approached, partially because I don't think they knew how to do it. But as you said, we got, not us, but there was $70 million allocated last year for equity. And in my travelings around the state and talking to people at conferences and whatnot, there seems to be a real commitment to equity like there's never been before. Can you talk about that a little bit? And if you want to say I'll talk about it later, then I'm happy to have you do that. But and what does it mean, and how's that going to be done?
Yeah, I would say there is a real focus on student equity, and you may...
Say first what equity is, because I'm not sure everybody understands it.
Well, I'll give you my version, but then I may turn it over to Vice President Dr. Greg Peterson on our Student Support Services. But basically, student equity is trying to identify the populations that we are serving that either are economically disadvantaged, are ethnically disadvantaged, mentally or emotionally disadvantaged. So there's various categories that we're looking at to make sure that they are succeeding at the same proportionate rate as, let's just say the white ethnic group are succeeding at. And so what we've done is we've developed a student equity plan that is going to be addressing how we're identifying those students. And we've identified the areas that we need to focus on within the plan. And then we're going to be working within the constituent groups on campus of trying to come up with processes of how we're going to try to improve the rates of success for those individual groups of students that need it. Dr. Peterson, do you want to add anything to what I said?
You know we're doing well when the CBO understands what student equity is.
Maybe she's not busy enough, I don't know, but that's a joke. That's not meant to be taken seriously.
Stop answering all questions.
No, I mean, the point, I mean, what I'm hearing is that not only is there a new and doubled down commitment to equity, but that, in fact, people at the highest level in higher education are saying, look, if California is going to succeed, it has to succeed in a disaggregated way. And what that means is in an equitable way. And that means that to the extent that the least of us are not succeeding, given the demographics of this state, that if we don't pull people along by who they are, however you want to slice and dice it, then we're not going to succeed. That is the history of California, and we have to pay more attention to it, and that's what we're making this commitment to do. That's why I think the folks with the money are saying, let's make sure that this gets done as well, that we not only provide opportunities for people to go to community colleges and for people to succeed in community colleges, but for everybody to get there and to succeed. And if everybody isn't getting there and everybody isn't succeeding, we're not meeting our mission. Fair?
Yes.
Trustee Archuleta, do you have a question?
Yes, I just have a comment, and regarding the use of the funds. And I just also want to add that in terms of equity, yes, the idea is to provide the opportunities, but also it's important to know that, that the concept of one size fits all does not work, and that equity is really about providing, students the resources that they need in order to be successful, rather than treating all students the same. So that's what's important. But what's also important, and what I like about the proposal for the student equity, is that those dollars can go directly to the students. And we have long known, and research has shown, that we are in a situation where the cost of textbooks far outweighs the cost of, fees, student fees. And so in this case, we can allocate some of that funding, and I know that we're going to be doing that here, but we can allocate that funding to supporting students by providing them textbooks, by covering the cost of textbooks, and also by providing the cost of transportation. So I think that that's really an important thing to keep in mind, that these dollars can, yes, they can go to create programs, they could go to create positions, but they can also go to serve the students directly. And that's what's, I think, important about, or to keep in mind in terms of how we develop our budget, that we should keep in mind that some of those dollars can go directly to serve those students.
If I can add just one more thing to this topic. This college was working many years ago to make student equity a priority, with the understanding that the state was moving in this direction, the nation's been moving in this direction. So I want to thank all the faculty and staff who've been working on this issue for so many years for positioning this college well. Having said that, I will say that from the governor and his staff are keenly focused on student equity, and the amount of money tied to outcomes in student equity will continue to increase, and the accountability will continue to increase. So we need to continue to move forward. If you heard the governor's most recent messages, whether at the state of the state or the most recent meeting of the University of California, he's clearly focused on student equity and expects to tie future funding to student equity.
All right. And again, reminder to all my colleagues, this is just a proposed budget.
Right.
And very early in the process.
What you see is not what we're going to get, but nonetheless, I'm sorry.
Exactly. The last two bullets that I kind of wanted to cover that are significant to the community colleges is that there's $48 million for career technical education pathways. We don't know how this funding will be allocated. It's more than likely it would be competitive grants, but it is a furtherance of the governor's initiative on kind of the career pathways and the moving students directly into the education that is going to get them a job the quickest that they can. And it's also a regional collaboration with the K-12 districts, as well as with the higher universities, CSUs and UCs. And then lastly, although there is no mention of a redesign of the community college capital facilities program, there is a mention that the governor wants to redesign the K-12 facilities program, and that would be in lieu of a statewide bond. So a statewide bond was not part of the governor's proposal. As we know here at Long Beach City College, we've been hoping for a statewide bond since the last one that was passed in 2006, because we have projects that are in the queue that we're wanting to get matching funds from the state for our buildings M and N here on this campus, as well as our building MM over at the Pacific Coast campus. So this is something that we're carefully watching to see if they are going to change the way funding for capital facilities is done. The current governor doesn't like debt, and a statewide bond for capital facilities for the K-14 system imposes debt on the state that is over and above our Proposition 98 guarantee. So that's kind of why the governor wants to get away from authorizing statewide bonds. I will say that there are 2 bills that have been proposed for a statewide bond, and there's another initiative going on trying to qualify for an initiative by CASH, which is Coalition of Adequate School Housing, that is primarily K-12, but they have put $2 billion in their initiative for the community college system. So there are efforts underway to try to get a statewide bond in 2016. The likelihood of any of that passing and getting on the ballot is unknown, but it's something that we do need to closely watch. Okay, so now what does all that mean in numbers as it relates to Long Beach City College? And so these are rough estimates, and as Board President Kellogg said and Trustee Archuleta agreed with, this is very early in the process, and the likelihood that these numbers are going to stay exactly as proposed, I guess, is very unlikely. We always see changes, but if they did stay, so for the COLA that was proposed, the estimate coming to Long Beach City College would be $1.6 million. The basic allocation that's proposed, again, that would be about $1.6 million coming to our college. And the CDCP rate, that was the enhanced non-credit rate, that would equate to about $311,000. So overall, total ongoing revenues, if it stood as proposed, would be about $3.5 million for us. And then the growth revenues you see there, if we did generate the additional 374 FTES, then that could mean about $1.77 million in additional revenue. But as President Oakley mentioned, we would have to lay out the funds to offer the sections first, and so that's not, that's a gross number, it's not a net income number. And then moving on to the other areas, the one-time funds and the mandated costs, that would be about $6.26 million. And then the categorical funds you see there for SSSP, it would be an additional $1.46 million on the categorical side. I already mentioned that it would require a match of about $3 million. Student equity could be as much as $1.93 million. I mentioned the adult education and the career pathways, the CTE there is unknown on how much Long Beach City College could receive. And then lastly, the Proposition 39, the energy projects, is about $449,000.
Trustee Zia, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, if you can go back to the revenue, okay, perfect. On the total ongoing revenues, the estimate of $3.5 million, is that both restricted and unrestricted general funds, or is it just restricted?
No, that is ongoing revenues. That would be unrestricted general fund revenues. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, part of that, our STRS and PERS increase, we know is about $1 million increase. So there's some other things that we've already planned and we know that we're going to be incurring. For instance, there's 27 new full-time faculty that we're planning on hiring for fall of 2015. There's a cost of about $2 million to hire the 27 new full-time faculty. The $1 million for the STRS and PERS increase, that ongoing revenue is basically gone already just with those 2 items alone, not to mention our step and column increases that we have every year, as well as our health and welfare benefits that go up every year.
Thank you.
So lastly, the next steps, again, we need to await for the May revise. That'll come out around May 15th. We will be basing our tentative budget on this January governor's proposal. If there's major significant changes that come down in the May revise, we will try to get those into our tentative budget. But the tentative budget comes to the board for approval on June 26th of 2015. After the May revise, there's going to be legislative hearings and sessions up in Sacramento with the hopes and intent of having an enacted budget at the state level before July 1st. After that point in time, then we will be preparing our adopted budget, and the adopted budget will come to the board here on September 8th of 2015. So with that, it concludes my presentation, and I'll open it up to any more questions
Any
that the
other
board may have.
questions, members of the board at this time?
Yeah.
Trustee Otto?
Yeah, it's my understanding that when this proposed budget was put together, that it was sometime in December, and that by the end of December, the state had finally had their income tax revenues in, and there was $1 billion more than they had based this budget on. Is that right?